Going to want to get rid of that. And even the players who I think probably would like to see a bigger slice of the pie are also not going to get too bent out of shape about doing this again, because ultimately more teams in the playoffs means more of those guys get to go to the playoffs. And that's ultimately what they want more than anything, is to have the chance to win a championship.
Absolutely. John,
Yes.
This naturally leads us to Jose Abreu being
As
a
one
Chicago
does.
Cub. Do you think this happens?
I don't know. I mean, I'm a little confused as to why the White Sox seem like they're already ready to move on. Like that team's problem to a large degree was offense, and they decide that the best way to solve that is to get rid of one of the best offensive players of their last 5 years.
Well,
I
also,
get that
if you're the
Abreu's
White
getting
Sox, you don't
older,
need to be making any decisions anytime soon. You know what you need to do is Rick Hahn, and what is our future with our front office? Like, you don't want, if you're a White Sox fan, you don't want any moves being made.
Why even is Rick Hahn being allowed to make decisions right now? Like
Right.
Granted, there's been nothing to suggest, but people who listen, I've been adamant about this, that I don't think Rick Hahn is the answer in Chicago, and I think the White Sox need a new approach. But yeah, it's like this guy who has led this team absolutely nowhere for the greater part of the last 6 years, aside from one Central Division title where they were then immediately wiped out in the postseason by Houston. Why is this guy being allowed to call the shots still? And again, how is the best outcome here that you lose one of not just the best bats on the team, but also a guy who has been noted by everyone who covers that team, everyone who's familiar with it, as being like the clubhouse leader, like a very important voice in that group? Is this really just so you can make room for Andrew Vaughn, a slightly above league average bat? Like, I'm sure Vaughn will get better, but it just feels like if the problems with the White Sox roster did not begin or end with Jose Abreu. He was very far from being part of the problem. And if this is something where it's like, oh, he wants more money than we feel comfortable giving a 36 or 37-year-old, or however old Abreu is, I know he's on the older side, first baseman with no ability to move to any other position. Okay, fine. I get that. But I don't know, man. I didn't get the sense from anything Abreu said after the season that he wanted to move on from Chicago. I got the sense he would happily stay there.
It's like the Contreras thing, just in with the White Sox. Neither of these two guys, who are just beloved by the fans and are important players to the team, really want to leave Chicago, but everything just keeps pointing like they're leaving Chicago. And you're like, what are you doing? Just do the obvious thing. Just pay this person and re-sign them. What are you doing?
Like, what better are the White Sox going to do? If this is all part of a plan of like, oh, we're going to use that money to get better in our pitching staff, or we're going to use that money to go after, that's not going to happen, but we're going to go after Aaron Judge or something. That's one thing. But if the end result of this is, no, we're just getting rid of Abreu so that Vaughn can play first base, and we could so that it'll open up more at bats for other different guys who aren't as good. It's like, then what's the point hopefully?
Yeah.
It's too early to decide, but I did find it weird that it already feels so definitive that Jose Abreu is not coming back to Chicago, and it's like, why not?
Yeah. And I wonder if that leads to more changes. Like, is Tim Anderson, is he part of this long-term
Look,
thing?
I'm going to be really interested to watch this White Sox offseason, if only because I think if Hahn doesn't go, then this is his last offseason, and that this is all right, you've got one last chance, make this team good or else you're done. Which is also going to be interesting to see play out with regards to how they handle the managerial decision. Because whoever Hahn hires, or let's be honest, whoever Jerry Reinsdorf approves of, theoretically, at least, if Hahn were to be let go, the new incoming manager or front office regime would probably be like, hey, we'd like to have our own guy in charge, not the dude that the outgoing guy picked. So I think we'll also get a better sense of how things are going to operate in Chicago when we start hearing more of the names connected to that managerial search, as opposed to what I hope is obvious, screwing around with mentioning Ozzie Guillen. It's like, there's no way the White Sox are stupid enough to do that.
They're not doing that.
No, it's like,
I think they're just going to go the cheap way, and he might just be the right guy anyway, based on what we saw. But Miguel Cairo,
I think that makes sense too. Because the other thing about that is, if a new regime comes in and Cairo hasn't performed, it's easy enough to say, well, he was part of the old regime, and he's not a guy that was brought in at any great expense. He would be leaving anyway if Hahn were to go in the first place. Or maybe they would move him into a different kind of role. But it
kind of feels a little bit like the Thompson aspect in
Philly. Yeah, it does. But I will be watching the White Sox offseason with great interest, because, and I think especially the way this roster has kind of been put together, the way it looks, they have all these kinds of weird questions about them. the AL Central obviously is there for the taking, and I think the Guardians will go into the season probably as the favorite for the division, just based off of how they ended this year, the fact that they're a very young team with a very good farm system. Another team also that I'll be very interested to see what they do in the offseason. But regardless, the Central will be there for the taking, though. I don't think that we're going to go into next season unless Cleveland does some really out of character stuff.
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to go into next season with a definitive,
it's like whenever the Rays win the
Astros
AL East, you're like,
Yeah.
okay, well, that was cool, but like,
well, it's I can see how that happened, but that doesn't mean I'm going to go into next season thinking it's going to happen again.
Yeah.
You
same sort of thing.
Yeah, and I think the White Sox with the right moves are very much right back in the conversation there.
We'll see. I mean, but from the Cubs aspect, the fact that they're linked there, do you think this signals? I think they're going to spend a little bit. My gut tells me that they're going to be buyers this winter. And I don't know.
My consistent feeling about the Cubs has been, and I know I said it when we talked about, I forget which player we talked about who's been previously connected to them, but
Correa.
I don't see them being Correa. That's right. I don't see them being big spenders this offseason. I see them being bigger spenders next offseason. Where they need one more year to kind of like sort through, okay, the prospects in our system, who's ready, who's not, the young guys on this team, who's actually part of this core, who is not, get rid of some of the money on the books to guys like Kyle Hendricks. Obviously, I don't think they're bringing Contreras back, so that will be money I think that they will pocket. Stroman's contract will expire. There might be an option somewhere in there, but either way, figure out what exactly they have it is fully in Seiya Suzuki, because he never really got the full season to do that because of injuries. I don't think they're ready to make that next step or to take that next step. I think it's more likely we see it the year after that, when we get a better sense of what the Cubs young core looks like. And when I think that ownership and front office group is going to align to be like, yes, these next 3 years, that's our window. We'll spend within that window. And then if it doesn't work, well, guess what we're doing again.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I think post-Chicago teams are going to be very, very fascinating to monitor this winter. An extension for the Cardinals general manager, Michael Girsch. Has he been good, John? Would you say he's been good?
Yeah, I think so. I think St. Louis has done a pretty good job. I think the one thing you can probably fault St. Louis for is not making the extra move necessary to take that team from NL Central contender / favorite to actual World Series contender. Mm-hmm. I think it's funny when that Jordan Montgomery Harrison Bader trade happened, and there was that feeling of, well, this doesn't really make sense for New York. Like, why are they getting rid of a useful starter in Montgomery for a guy in Bader who's not even going to be able to play for them until the postseason? I think a lot of the speculation at the time was, well, it's a trade.